Well, I'm Jeff Barczewski, and I'm fairly new to the group. I've been here like once or twice, but I wasn't able to come very much. My daughter was still around. I would have her on Thursdays. So, but now she's in Mizzou, so I'm frees up my Thursdays. So I'll plan on being here a lot more. And so yeah, I've been working in programming since I got out of college in '89 with U of I, and did a variety of things in my career. Started out at the Air Force there, and then the last couple of years I've been working. I was working with the Elsevier team, Justin and some of the guys over here, on a Node project there, and it was very exciting. And we got to really learn, how to push Node. We looked at all the latest things that are out there and benchmarked a lot of things, tried a lot of things, and found like what was real, what was maintainable and solid and would perform. And we really paid attention to code quality and a lot of other things, that when we picked modules and projects and frameworks and that. So I really got to learn a lot, and the team was just a great team. Justin was a great manager, so I really enjoyed it. In the last, I guess, since April, then I was trying to search kind of what I wanted to do next, and I knew it wanted to be with Node because I really like Node and JavaScript and all that. And I worked on some other projects that I had in my mind for a while that I was wanting to get done. And from there, I basically realized that I've always liked teaching, and I've always liked mentoring people and teaching. And I really like the current way things are being taught nowadays with screencasts and all that. So I basically started a company called CodeWinds, which is down here on the bottom. And the idea is to basically bring quality screencasts and ebooks and webinars, stuff that you can do on your own, or a webinar might have some some interactivity and all that as well. But basically stuff you can go at your own pace. You can go back and forth. You've probably seen screencasts from like Peepcode and that before. Pluralsight is actually bought Peepcode now, and they've got some. And I just think it's a really powerful way to teach. And so that's what I was working on, and starting to get ramped up there to learning all the skills I needed to do good quality screencasts, audio and video and all that. It's a lot of fun stuff. I just bought Final Cut Pro 2. So because it really makes editing easier. So anyway, so now that's what I was wanting to do. And all of a sudden, last a couple weeks, things changed, and I got this opportunity to contract at MasterCard on an exciting project there, and it was right in my wheelhouse. We're doing Node. It's on the mobile team, and so I'll be splitting time with working on that, and then doing my CodeWinds on the side for now. But that's still my dream to continue that and make that come. So anyway, HAPI.js, or HAPI is short for that. What is it? Get this monitor stuff set up here. The acronym kind of started from best I can tell, from HTTP API. So the H and the API, HAPI. But then, creative minds went from there, or maybe it was the other way around, I don't know, but Aaron Hammer and his team decided, that they were going to go along with this kind of Nickelodeon theme, and I don't really know much about Nickelodeon, but I think there's characters in that and terms in there, and happy, joy, joy is one of those songs they sing or something, one of the cartoons, and so they playfully named it HAPI, and also then a lot of the module names are named similarly to Nickelodeon type characters, I believe. Again, I don't know, since I don't watch that, I don't know, but that's what it appears to be, and they got little cartoony things for them. But anyway, so Aaron Hammer had been doing web frameworks for a couple of years prior to this, and he was building on Node since 0.4, and he started out with building something for Yahoo, which at the time was called Sled. And since then it's been open sourced as Post Mile, I think, is how it's the project name. But anyway, it was building on Express, and it's trying to to build a framework for building web apps very rapidly and quickly. It wanted to add in things that just weren't there in bare bones Express. And so he started doing that, and so he learned a lot of things about how to make a maintainable framework and that, and things he ran, different issues he ran into. I got to meet Aaron. I met him a year ago, right now at Real-Time Conf, which would be starting tomorrow, and he was actually speaking on OAuth, and he gave a pretty interesting discussion there about where things went wrong with OAuth 2 and all that, and where he thought things should go. And I didn't actually get to meet him at that conference, but then last June we were both at JSConf in Amelia Island, and I had met his coworker Kevin Decker, and was talking with him several times. And at dinner we were having, at the final dinner, Aaron and Kevin came and sat at my table, so I got to talk a lot about different things. And so it was great to meet Aaron and pick his brain and just to see how where things came from. So Aaron went to Walmart, I think in 2011, and again, they wanted to utilize Node. They heard about Node scalability, and they wanted to build they had several guys over there that were evangelizing Node, and they wanted to build a framework that they could really then their mobile apps on, and even beyond that, start out with a mobile app REST framework that's behind runs everything, and then if it goes well, then they would eventually potentially scale out to other systems as well. So that was kind of the design goal that they were looking for. And so Aaron went back to his days of SLED and kind of looked at everything and started to plan and design. And they started with with Express, and they ran into some limitations there. And then they tried Director or Flatiron and built on that. And then he ran into problems there. And so and finally they kind of stepped back and said, are we going to continue to keep hacking on these other systems, that don't expose themselves the way they need to, or what? And they just weren't having fun at it. It wasn't a fun framework to work with. So they kind of went back to the drawing board and said, well, what could we do if we, start from scratch and based on the knowledge you have. And it's really not from scratch. It's based on what Express did and what Director did, and they're building on all those things that are already out there. And so they kept some of the ideas and changed a few things, and that's what become HAPI. And HAPI is in production right now, Walmart, and doing rather well. They've they're running more and more things on it. Walmart's hiring like crazy to get more Node developers, because they're just loving this platform. It's really letting them do things that it couldn't do before. And so I'm going to tell you more about that. The sweet spot for this is really building web apps and REST APIs. I mean, it does both. A lot of times you have to tack something else on to do one or the other. This one can really do both. I mean, it has the main functionality you need for serving up web pages and rendering views, as well as doing great REST APIs. So it's really kind of a one-stop shop there. So the first question that Aaron gets asked so much is why? Why do you build HAPI? And I've watched several of the videos and that, and going also back to talking with Aaron, because they actually were really kind of introducing the HAPI to JSConf. It was kind of coming out last summer in a big way. And this is kind of my attempt to try and put it in pictures or in a story. Up here on the left, you have a stock car, a race car, and it's designed to be very fast. It's designed to be very light. They throw out everything they don't need, because they want to keep the weight down. And so and you can easily swap out things. You can put a new engine in. You can everything is designed to change very quickly. You can change the suspension, the transmission, the gear ratios. All those things are easy to change, and it works pretty well for what it does. It's very fast. However, if you want something that's going to go a little further, if you need to drive this on the street, you need to go to the corner store, then now you've got to add a bunch more things to it. Now you need turn signals, and you need stoplights, and you need windshield wipers, and you need, if you're going to drive your spouse around, you need another seat. It's got one seat. No trunk. So it doesn't have things on. Now you can bolt those things on, and it'll work. It'll be street legal after you get everything all in there. It'll work. But you can also see there's a whole team of people up there in that picture, and they're pros at what they do. They know this car inside and out. They can take it apart, in their sleep. But they're experts. Now compare that to this car down here, the Corvette Stingray. This is the 2014 version, and this car is fast, but it's got what you need in it to drive in the street. And you can take this car out for a good spin, and it's ready to go. Everything's in there. Punch the directions, punch the address in your GPS, and follow the thing, and you get there. So that's kind of the difference between this. That would be my attempt to kind of explain the direction that Expresses went, and then this would be more the direction that HAPI's went. Aaron wanted HAPI to really have what the developers needed, to be able to start working, and they wanted your average developer to be able to jump right in, know what's going on, and not be surprised, And so there's a different fundamental philosophy. This was, Express was designed to be very light and small, and everything about it is just, very functional and pieces. And this is more of a, a full framework that's ready to go, all in one. So that's kind of my story there. So the express and director pattern and all that, that's the kind of the request response next on the right here. So Aaron gets asked about that, a lot. So okay, because that's the big, that's the most popular web framework out there, and it's perfectly good. It does its job. You just need to know how to use it. You need to know how to use it and how to put it together. With HAPI, things are just built in. I mean, they do pull things out as plugins. But the key things that most people are going to need are just in there, and you just configure them, turn them on, or in some cases they're just on, by default if that makes sense. So with Express and a lot of these other frameworks, they really take a point of view of we can just code up what we need to, and we'll write code to configure it. And HAPI, that works, and you can still do that in HAPI as well, but with HAPI, they wanted to have another way to do it where you could use configuration. And the big reason there is just cutting and pasting code is, usually doesn't end well. I mean, usually, you cut things here and there, and you got to change it over there, and it's just versus cutting and pasting configuration is usually pretty clean. There's not a lot of issues that you run into doing that, and so they chose more of a configuration route. You can still code it, but that's the main way to do it. The other thing that they chose is the node objects. With Express, the idea was to take what Node already gave you, which is you could fire up a web server that listens to HTTP pretty easily in Node, but it doesn't do anything. It doesn't have any functionality around it, so you need to add on a lot of things to make it to be useful. Well, what Express did is they said, well, we want to keep that. We want to just use that, and we're going to just bolt something around around that. And actually, the objects that come back from Node. The request and response, those are those top two parameters up there. Those things are actually the raw objects that came back, and they do add things on them. It's JavaScript, so you can do that. But unfortunately, it's kind of hacking with you're kind of monkey patching things in. You're taking something out and putting something on, and if Node ever decides to change some of their internals or use, and Basic Express will then add other things on that object as well. And if things change in Node core, they could stomp on. There could be problems where things are stomping on. So Aaron really wanted to keep separate from core objects. He didn't want to be messing with with a Node core object. So HAPI basically takes your raw objects and it just keeps them, puts them in a property. And they're there if you need them, but most of the time you're going to work through an abstraction, and then basically that lets Node core be able to do whatever they need, and they're not going to be messing with, there's not going to be any conflict with changes now. So that's one other difference. And then one of the really big differences that it was, from Express and some of these other ones, is that you really can't use that stack at all until you fire up a network. And so that can be, that's kind of a problem, especially when you're trying to test, because now you got to like find ports, or you got to use an ephemeral port and ask the, what port it used, and there's the whole issue of just firing up, things on your network or on your box, to start up a network just to be able to use, the stack and to test it. And some things are pretty hard to test. It's difficult to, you got to pass all the headers in, and you got, to create objects that, to make the request. You got to start up another process and make a request. I mean, it's just a lot of moving parts. And authentication can be kind of tricky too with using a live network. So what HAPI did is they just had an abstraction. Strata did this as well, and basically you can fire up the framework and make requests into it without even starting the network. So you can use the whole stack. You can check your routing. You can check authentication. You can do check headers and everything, and it's all available. So you can just fire this thing up, and all the properties are there. You can investigate them. So makes your tests run very fast too, because then you don't have to wait for the stack to load, and you don't have to go through all those other layers. It's all just right there internal. The main reason that they really needed this was if you're trying to do things like OAuth 1, or I think it's 1 or 2, I guess it's 1. They were needing to call back in to the stack to make a authenticate or something. I'm not familiar with how that works, but they couldn't do that without actually launching something and calling back in, making a network connection back in. And I guess they had a lot of use cases where they needed to do that. And so anyway, so they basically, that was kind of the biggest thing, that kind of drove them away from using one of these other frameworks. And they just, just didn't like the experience of hacking on stuff that was kind of bolted on already. So, so with HAPI, you don't have to do that. So this is a summary slide that I kind of stole from Aaron, just the key points. 3 R's for HAPI. It allows you to do reflection, which can give you can generate code docs, so it makes it easy to generate code docs. And then stub generation. Walmart had a big need to create stubs, in Java and C# and all these other languages, so they could, for all their mobile platforms. And they didn't want to have to, like, every time they change the API, to have to go and manually, make a change over here that's going to, accept the new parameters or whatever. So just by having things be reflective, they can basically generate all the stubs, So that makes it, they can just go ahead and make changes and, generate the stubs and then give those to the .NET and Java people, and they can just use them, right there. It reduces errors. In his experience with dealing with teams and that, by having things in there, it just made it easier. Validation is baked right in, so you just turn on validation to check for these things. You don't have to, get another library and figure out how to use that or whatever. And it's it's throughout the whole system, and I'll show you some great examples of how you can use validation not only on your routes but other places. The routing, they did a lot. They looked at the routing, and a lot of these other routing systems use colon for their routing or whatever, and that's a valid URI character. So HAPI chose to go with more of like a handlebar style routing. But they also found that on a large team that with Express or whatever, you would load these routes in. You configure those, and there was no like checking if something later on came in and took over that route or whatever. If conflicts came up, you're just trying to figure out what happened. You didn't know there was a problem until you ran your tests or until somebody used the site, and so there was problems with routing. Well, HAPI's routing is deterministic. So it does not let you put in, you know, routes that will conflict. And even if you do things like name the parameters in the routes different, but it's the same kind of format, you know, it'll detect that. And it'll say, no, this is a duplicate route, and it'll basically error out. So you don't get, you know, to the point where you have to, you know, debug it later, because it's usually harder to debug things later on, you know, in an error stack. Reusability. So another thing that they wanted, you know, with being Walmart, and they had, you know, big plans for these mobile platforms, and, you know, and for Walmart.com in general, is they're going to have lots and lots of business logic and lots of sites, and they're connecting, and they don't want to be always worrying about HTTP all the time. And so they try to break apart a little bit, you know, isolate you a little bit from the HTTP, so you still have access to it and you can use it, but you don't need to use it for all the time. And so it makes it a little easier, a little cleaner separation. It looks more like business logic. People are, you know, and those methods are easier to test a lot of time if they're not, you know, dealing with, you know, with request response, you know, mechanisms and all that. Helpers is another great thing that I'll show you that's allows you to basically take functions and make them available throughout the system, and then take advantage of a lot of the other infrastructure they already have. Built-in validation and caching. And caching, you know, is one of the key things too, especially for somebody who's trying to scale up. So here's another slide. I grabbed this one from him as well, or most of these points from him. While they were waiting for Walmart to you know, test everything after they got everything ready to go, they had a few months to, while it was going through the, you know, additional, you know, manual integration testing and all that. So they went ahead and kept working on the code and trying to get, you know, more and more code coverage. So Aaron said that when they went from 85% to 100%, they got 100% now. When they went from 85% to 100%, at every percent up they went, that they found at least one bug. And these were like, you know, bugs that, you know, would get you at runtime. You know, they were not like weird things. They were things that would be hard to track down. And so they, you know, it was, you know, bragging rights that they got to 100% and they, you know, try to keep it there. In fact, they pushed a lot of the code coverage tools to the limit because they couldn't get, you know, so they had to actually extend those as well to try and, you know, get the rest of the coverage and that. So that's, you know, that's a great thing. They've got a full-time team. Back when he did his talk about this, he had 3 people. I don't know the exact number now, but and it's designed for Walmart scale. And so you know, he doesn't claim that, you know, he knows it's going to scale, you know, infinitely well, but they'll fix it if it doesn't, and they've designed it to try and be scalable, and you know, every indication is it is, especially, you know, it's doing very well at Walmart. It was open source from day one, so, you know, it wasn't like an afterthought. They knew they wanted to open source this thing. They actually, you know, they're a big community supporter. Walmart, you know, a lot of times is really reaches out to communities in our local area. And on the internet, they're trying to do the same thing here. So they really want, you know, people to participate. We're supposed to possibly get some shirts, so I think they're in the mail. But if they come, we'll give those out next month. But they're excited about, after they get this thing built up, they love for, you know, other people to be contributors, and, you know, even you know, they're not necessarily in the business to build frameworks. They needed one, so they built it, but they want, you know, other involvement. It's not something they want to continue to own, you know, on their own. But yet they've got a full-time team working on it and making changes. Aaron describes this as the HAPI design as an expansion contraction pattern. And what he means there is that what they'll do when they come up with a new feature they need is they'll actually throw that right into the main code, the production code, or developer code, but the main HAPI code, and they'll work with it in there, and they'll try to shape the API, and they'll try to, you know, to make it work. And I guess one thing they do is kind of, they don't document it for a while until, you know, they don't want people to know about it until it's ready to go. So they'll put it in the code and start working with it, and, you know, shape that out. And a lot of these things, you know, they don't come on unless you configure them or whatever. But then they can finally get that, you know, and they'll find, you know, what makes sense to stay in the main core, you know, for that really great experience of using the web app, and what things should be broken out. And so if something is really can be pulled out and be separate, and there's really not any benefit, you know, for it to stay core. There's no, you know, benefits of the coding to be integrated. Then they'll pull it out. So they call that, you know, they throw the stuff in there, they work with it, they make sure it's going to, you know, try and see how it's going to work and how it feels, and then if it can be pulled back out, you know, without causing a problem or a reduced experience, then they'll do that. So then they've got lots of plugins that are kind of pulled out. There's things that you might want, but you know, you don't use every day. So I kind of mentioned some of these things before, but there's a lot of functionality right in HAPI. You don't have to install a lot of other things. You got validation, you got caching, compression's built in, you got authorization. It actually uses other libraries for these things too. So the auth uses the passport.js library, which has a ton of different things exposed there. State, you know, you built in lots of different cookie strategies and managing cookies for you. You know, with a new thing called Iron, I forget the name, but basically it's a signed cookie mechanism that, you know, that you can make sure that things weren't changed. It'll manage, you know, whether if you want to keep so much state on the client, but you go too much, you know, but you go over that, and then it'll keep the rest of it on the session on the server. You know, so there's a lot of nice configurability on how to use these things, and a lot of best practices built in. All of the normal utils you would need, you know, for file or directory serving. You know, this thing will fire up and become a static web server pretty easily. One main thing they needed was a really good proxy, because they actually, you know, when you come into Walmart, their main API, then they actually fetch a lot of things from other servers. So they have images and CSS and JavaScript and whatever. I mean, and so then basically there's an easy way to configure just a built-in, you know, streaming proxy that'll just connect right up to these things safely. Views and plugins, so you can, you know, work with your template engines. Plugins and helpers, so they bring, you know, there's a way to add your own plugins as well as the ones they've provided. Helpers, which is a really great thing I mentioned a little bit earlier. And another great thing is prerequisites. So they basically have a way for you that when you come into a route, that if there's a lot of other things that need to be done, you can set those up as prerequisites. And so it'll actually do those things first, and then when it's all done, then it'll hand it off to the route. And I'll show you that, because that's really kind of slick. All right, time for some examples. So I thought first off we'd fire up terminal and create a web app. So this is the live coding part of it. Well, let's hope this works. All right, so I'm going to create a new directory here. So I'm just going to make a empty npm init to make an empty package JSON. Take all the defaults here. I can go in and edit this later if I needed to. And then now I'm just going to do npm install -- save HAPI. And if our network holds up, we'll pull down the packages and you can see in the package JSON, you know, it's basically got dependencies there, HAPI 1.14. So that's that pulled that down. All right, so then let's just go over to my editor. Then I'm going to create a new file. Let's just do index.js. All right. So okay, so I'm going to basically create a variable pulling down HAPI, and you'll see in a lot of their documentation they always like to use the uppercase naming for their name option. You can do whatever you want, but that's just, you just look at the examples, they do that, and that just kind of reminding you that it's more of a collection. I mean, you don't new this thing, but but it's kind of a, it's an object, and it's not just a normal variable that you're working with. It kind of avoids some collisions. So HAPI, require HAPI. And then to create a server, we just do new HAPI server. And then this thing, this server will take, it's a variable number of arguments, but it basically is looking for strings for the IP address or the name that you're going to use. By default, it would be on 000, so it would be on all IPs. But we're going to go ahead and say we want localhost. We just want 127.0.0.1. And then if you want to give it a port, then you can just pass a number. So let's just do 3000. And then if you want to do additional things, you can pass in an object here. And again, these things are all optional. You can do different combinations, and it can be in any order. So they've made that very easy to.
Are there defaults if you call it without arguments?
Yeah. Default is 000, and then I think the port is 80. By default, unless you have TLS certs configured in the options, then the port would default to 443. So yeah, so that's kind of your defaults there. And then if we just did server start, that will run. We don't have anything configured there, but let's just see if we got that much going. Let me go down this far. Oh, I'm not in my directory. I'm going to directory here. HAPI. Okay. So we're running. Let's see what happens. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the command line tool called HTTP-IE. I'm not HIPI, or I don't know how you say it, but HTTP-IE. It's a Python tool. It's like Perl, except it's kind of got some nice features. It does a lot of automatic things for you, kind of good defaults for different things. It does color coding and a lot of other stuff too. So it's pretty slick. So I'm going to demo a lot of things with that.
Did you pull that in with Homebrew?
You pull that in with pip, or there's Python's install mechanism. Yeah. So localhost 3000, and all right. So basically, you can see that there is a server running there, and then by default, it's saying there's nothing found at that address. And by default, the setup is JSON, so it's basically all set up for like a REST API to serve. So, and you'll notice that even gzip encoding is already turned on and enabled. So if the client had said that I can accept, it accepts gzip encoding or deflate, then the server is already configured to honor that, and it'll take care of it. If it's not, if you did a curl command, because HTTP-IE does, acts more like a browser, so it actually turns that on by default. But if you were to do this way with curl, you'll see that there wasn't gzip encoding turned on there, so you still get the same message. So anyway, that's all built in. All right, so now let's go ahead and add something in. So basically, like you do in any of the other programs, you want to set up some routes for things. So there's several different ways. There's a way to add a single route and all that, but I'm just going to show you guys the kind of the way that I would do it, where you just kind of have a big array and you pass that in. That's seems to me to be a good way to do it. So let's create that. So I'm just going to create an array here, and then and it's just an array of objects, and much like you've probably seen before, let's say it takes a get, and let's make the path hello, and And then you can attach a handler right here. And you could put the function inline right here and all that, but and I'll just do that for now. But basically, one of the ways HAPI was written was to be able to split things apart. And as you can imagine, as you get more and more routes in here, this file is going to grow and grow and grow. And so it's nice to be able to see your routes all in one spot, but you don't want to have all this code. So what a lot of people will do is you can pull in things, require in other things, and just have keep your routes just kind of clean, but just have modules for your other things. So I'll show you that as we go along. But for now, we'll just go ahead and it has different ways that you can use pass in a function and it'll work with or without parameters, and there's a lot of different things there. But basically, you're just the simplest thing is just to have and so is to pass in the request. So the request is there, and then now we can use we can basically call reply to send something back, and we can obviously do all the other things on the request as well. So let's just go ahead and say so that looks good from what I can tell sideways here. And alright, so I'm going to go back down here and we'll just restart this. And obviously you could use something like a watch or something to keep watching for changes or whatever. But okay, so again the hello without any path is not found, but now if we go to hello, it's not found either. Let's see here.
Do you ever pass?
Oh, I didn't do anything with the routes, so I created them and I didn't do anything with them. All right. So now you get to see how debugging works. So. All right. So yeah. So server dot route. And you can give it the routes. All right, good. So we got hello world and again GZIP coding and all that, and it took care of the content length and set the content type, and so it does a lot. It does a lot of default things for you that you don't have to worry about. I could go in and change this though. Say okay, I don't like this. Is really supposed to be plain text. It's not supposed to be HTML. It's so I can. So I can basically change that. I can just say I can chain on here text / plain, and I'm basically setting the MIME type for it. And you could also set headers, and you can it just chains on. There's just a nice pattern to that. And so let's see. Okay, so now we see content type text plain, so that change worked. All right, so that's the hello world, and since I knew that my typing was probably going to be slowing us down here, I've got examples to walk through for the other things that will run, but you can don't have to sit here and watch me type so much. All right, so any questions so far on anything that as you can see, it was pretty easy to pull down. There's just one command to pull down HAPI and set it up and ready to go. And it's got most of the, like I said, most of the things already in there.
Is their code pretty well documented? Do they have a lot of comments in their code, or how does internally is it easy to go in and work through the code base?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. I haven't had to spend a lot of time in it, but I did have to go in and do an addition that I'm going to be submitting back to them. And it was an additional option for server start. And so, yeah, I found it in about 5 minutes. I mean, and I didn't even know where I was going. I just kind of started, and things were named right, and you just go in there, and it was pretty, there wasn't a lot of code on each line. And they've got a lot of things, packaged up nicely. They've got a built-in mechanism for doing default properties and all this kind of stuff. So their code looks really nice because it's nice and clean as far as,
that's good.
How things are laid out. So yeah, so I was pretty happy. All right,
is there some kind of logic behind that .reply? I mean, it looks very foreign compared to other frameworks. Is there?
Yeah, I mean, if you basically, I think the idea was they wanted to just have one parameter or one object that you're passing around, and so that's this request object. It's actually not the request. It's not the node request. That's down in .raw, but it's basically just an abstraction, and then they wanted a way to send back whatever, and so this reply will take a string, it'll take an object. If you give it an object, it does JSON, and that's actually in my code examples. But then there's often you want to just tweak something, so then that's when the whole chaining idea came in and said, oh, we can just tweak the reply here and add headers or add type or whatever, and it's kind of a nice a lot of times it does what you need right out of the bat, but if you need to change something, it's just change it.
You mentioned in your notes something about Strata. Are you going to contrast this with Strata at any point? Or?
I didn't specifically, but at the end, when we get done kind of going through everything, I think that'd probably be a good time to mention differences in how things will work. Like Strata, they have a real good support for streaming in and out, and so and parameters and all that. So that's with Express, like we talked about earlier, where when you want to do like gzip encoding or whatever, you basically replace the right and end methods on the stream, and you plug in your own functions, and then and it's kind of just monkey patched in, to do that. And they have a real nice story for how they do that. Now Strata, Strata was a nice abstraction as well because it separated things out. But the thing I like about this API, compared to Strata, is that it's just it seems easier to get your hands around. At Strata we had a lot of higher order functions, functions that created functions, and they just always, you have to think about them, once or twice, and they were really going for trying to make this something that every developer could get, could understand. I think Express might have something like a request.send or something, which is really basically, a lot of times you just see request.end where they pass something in and a string or something. So it's not 100% form, but I mean, yeah, it is a little different. I mean,
there it's on the response though.
Yeah, you're right. It's on the response.
This was a little bit.
Yeah, and this is the case that they're. Yeah, and maybe it really maybe it should have a different name. Maybe request isn't the best name for this. But
so does the order of operations matter there? For example, could you put type before reply, or another way to ask the question would be, what is reply returning? Is reply returning back the request object, or is it returning?
It's returning back. No, it's returning back a different object that has the appropriate. It has like type and that on it. So if you and I noticed that today when I was trying something, I was just curious, like if you were to reply with an error, what would happen? And I knew what replying error would actually throw back an error, on the server. But I was wondering what happens if I tried to call type, on the error, and it doesn't have that method. So basically, my code didn't compile, so it was fine. So it is a special object that comes back, and then based on what kind of object it is, it's going to typically have the main methods you need, like headers and type and all that. So, but yeah.
So how do you extract parameters from here? The way you read this one, typically you have request and response. So you'll extract parameters from the request and then do something on the response. So how do you? I mean, if I read this correctly, like someone who's not familiar with this,
right.
They think they're doing something on the request object, right? I mean, obviously you want to extract some parameter to respond to something. So how do you?
I think I got some pretty good examples. I'll show you here. So let me go right into the next next one, and then we'll see if that answers the question after it. So before I go on, I'm going to finish. I had one more example here where I was basically replying with just an object. So I just created just any kind of an object, or a literal object, and pass that into reply, and then that will go back, as JSON. And then, yeah, I just got both those mapped up here. So that's that.
Does it warn you if you do anything weird? If you pass in an object that's not going to serialize cleanly or something like that? I mean, I didn't know if they do any sort of checking on the objects passed in, or just if it's a naive JSON string file.
Yeah, I don't, why don't we try it to see, because I didn't try that. All right, so let me go. Okay, so let's go over to HAPI examples. Okay, so this came back application JSON, gzip encoded, and all that. All right, so now if we, what would be a good object we could?
Well, if you stick something
like a date.
Yeah.
Convert to string. So that's probably not the best one, this example.
No, that's fine. I just, I'm not sure.
I'm trying to think. Yeah, I don't. I'd have to look into that. I'm not sure what it does for you if it's not serializable. All right. So next.
Actually, if I want to, can you go back to that code?
This one?
Yeah. Here this request is kind of the HAPI request object. So if I want to access the core request object of Express, can I do that?
Yeah, you can. It's available. Obviously, since they're trying to provide abstraction, they would rather not, you limit those cases where you're doing it, so in case things change, you don't have to go through all your code. You can search for that pretty easily. It is there though, and so, in fact, I guess we could see what happens if we try to echo that back. Request.raw. Okay, why is it complaining? I can spell something wrong. Let's see. Oh, missing space. I don't think so. Alright.
You need two semicolons.
Oh, did I? Didn't show us anything, did it? Let me make sure I got the right thing. So here, let me jump over to the HAPI API. So if you type in hapijs.com, it'll redirect you to spunkco.github.io. So Walmart Labs open source project. I guess they really are taking it to heart. They don't want it to be owned by them in the long run. They want to have it communities driven. So they basically named it spunkco on GitHub, and I think that's another Nickelodeon name. I don't really know for sure, but there you can see the little cartoony thing here. But anyway, on the HAPI page, hapijs.com will take you here, and the place you're going to spend most of your time is here in this API reference. There's a couple videos that show you here. Here was the Hello World as example, just kind of what we just showed. But the main meat of things is right here in the API reference. And so once you kind of figure your way around this thing, it's got pretty good documentation. I think that if there's any drawbacks to HAPI at all, it's just the fact that it needs more, and it needs more examples and tutorials, and they got them in here. But I mean, there's just and sometimes there's a typo here or there or whatever. But that's kind of true everywhere. One of the things that Aaron talked about with Express that that really upset him is that sometimes these other modules would require other modules. So if you pull something in, and you didn't know that there's dependencies. So basically, if you wanted to use, some of them require a body parser or they require a cookie parser, and if you put those in the wrong order, then there can be problems too. And so there's a lot of hidden things you had to know, to put things together. And so that was one reason they didn't like the whole thing of making everything completely separate, as far as things go. But anyway, when you get in here and look around a little bit, it's not too bad. Basically server options. No, I'm sorry. We're trying to look for request reply. So here's request object, and so when you click on something, it usually expands out, and you can see what other things there. Let's see, request reply. No, I'm sorry. We're looking for the raw. So you were asking about the raw. We're at request properties. Jumping back and forth. So all right. So here's raw. A raw object containing the node HTTP server projects. So request and response. Okay. So I guess they're there. Maybe I just.
You got two semicolons. So move your cursor there.
There you go. Good catch. Let's just log it out so you can see it. When we do just raw by itself, and then we'll also do request.raw.request. So down here, let's see what we got. Hard to see. So I guess it's the first one was logging this as well. So yeah, so you've got access to all that. If you needed to get to it, obviously they try to provide things to do it the happy way, and to use the abstraction layer. Okay, so let me jump into the code again. All right, so so that was that one. Okay, let me switch over to hello 2. Okay, so down here, I just built on. I had hello and I had hello JSON. Buffers work the same way. Obviously you can do binary data, or you can do text data in a buffer. And obviously it's not going to know what you want to use. So so in a buffer you'll want to set the type to whatever it is when you do it. Error, you can send errors, and you can also do streams. So let me just show here. Here's a binary one where I was saying this could be binary data, and just reply buffer, type image PNG, and boom, it takes care of sending it. Here's an example of an error, and actually HAPI has a lot of built-in errors. You can just do a new error, and throw a message in there, and it'll use that. But they also have a lot of defined ones, for bad requests, for invalid, authentication. I mean, there's a lot of different ones that you can just standard ones out of the box that you can use, and it'll set the right HTTP code. So that's another example of you don't necessarily have to know the codes. You can use, you can kind of use by name, and it'll set the code for you. And you can override the code if you want to. You say, I want to send the error, but I also want to change the code to something specific. 203 instead of 201 or something, or status codes and all that. So yeah, that'll let you do errors. So here's streaming. So basically, up top I just included one of the Streams 2 APIs that pass through, and basically you just reply. You just throw the stream in there. So that's the object that gets sent in, and I can set the type of what that's going to be. And then here I was simulating, an asynchronous function where I'm going off to my database and pulling, data down, waiting 3 seconds, and then eventually I'm going to write, in chunks, hello from stream, and so that would, write the stream out. And so streaming is the first class citizen.
Do you have any examples how you're using that with the plugin I guess plugins are their version of middleware, I guess.
Yeah, plugins. There's several things. There's plugins. There's helpers, which are. I'll show you those because it's kind of hard to explain. But there's plugins, there's helpers, and then there's something called extension functions. And a plugin is really kind of, you know, you can do like so much from a plugin. It's really designed to be a, you know, it can be separate module, and you can set routes. You can do a lot of different things, you know, from plugins. And there's actually permissions. You can give certain permissions to the plugin. So that's another thing. They've allowed you to, like, when you instantiate a plugin, you can say, well, here's what it's allowed to do. And so that way you don't have to go and review all the code. I mean, you can say this thing can only do read-only operations or whatever, and maybe set some, you know, some variable in a particular area, you know, for itself, really, for somebody to look at later. So there's a lot of safety built in as far as how that works. Yeah, let me grab next one here. So let's see. Helpers. I had a little bit of an order that I was kind of going through that kind of made sense. All right, echo stream. Okay, so this one, he did this example on his slides. Basically, if you know, by default, it's going to default to parsing the input, depending on what kind of input it is, you know, that's coming in. And if it was JSON or whatever, then we could also override that. And we could say, no, I don't want to parse that. I can just say I want the payload to be streamed. And this is the other thing I was going to explain. You know, originally we had in our routes down here, we had method, path, and handler. But then, you know, there's a lot of times when you want a little bit more. And you wanted to be able to keep this nice and lean here in the routes file, but then you want to be able to like, configure other things. So basically, you can use config instead, and then config inside of that would have handlers. So what I was showing up here is kind of echo is going to be my config object, and inside there is a handler, and then I can also specify other things about this route, and so it stays together. So in this case, I'm saying the payload needs to be streamed and not parsed. I could turn on validation and caching there as well, and that way this route file still stays pretty nice and clean. It doesn't have too much in it, and the key pieces go with the, you know, are separated out. So anyway, this just streams it right back. The input streams it right back in the output, so it doesn't, you know, doesn't bring it all in memory first or whatever. After the next one, validation. Okay, so. I guess start down here. So here on this validation, I've got three different methods. One is doing an add, and I'm actually using parameters off the path. So I'm specifying A and B. I'm going to add, you know, A and B, and then the next one is basically I'm just going to be using a query string. So I'm add query string, and then the final one there is a post, and I'm going to be doing. I'm going to use the body, the payload, you know, is what they call it in HAPI. And so up here on the add, I can turn validation on right here, right next to the handler function. So here's the handler function again. You can see that I'm taking request.params A and request.params B. I'm parsing those to an integer, base 10, and then adding those together and then replying with the sum. So basic stuff. But we know that that's not, you know, that wouldn't really do what we wanted if it was strings or other types. So you can actually, you know, HAPI, you know, it's built-in validation. So you can basically just go in and say, I want to validate things on the path parameters, and I want to validate A and B, and I want to basically make sure those are numbers. And you can do things like it's require. You can say the min length, max length, regexes. I mean, it's, you know, it's got all the normal stuff. There's numbers, strings. It's full featured.
Nice, but it doesn't actually support going ahead and converting for you. It's interesting. It might have been just another step to say it's a number and go ahead and make it automatically.
Oh, right, yeah. I wasn't sure either. When I first tried that example, I was like, you know, is it gonna convert it or not? And I'm not sure why they didn't choose to do that.
Because it seems like you could potentially be doubling up on the parsing. Not that that's...
Oh, right, yeah, I guess, yeah, I don't know, yeah. So it didn't, it didn't do it. So, all right, so well, let's go here. So I'm going to show you the spot where a lot of these things are set, because it's real, you know, if you're using this, you'll want to know. So in the server, we got where we're setting the routes. So route options is where a lot of these things are at. And so here's path, method, vhost. You could do virtual host if you wanted to say this route is only for, you know, certain host name. And again, you can go straight into handler, or you can use config, which is config. Okay. So then if you go into config, then you know you have handler and context and pre, and here's validate. So validate says it's got a point. It points over here to joy. Joy is the happy joy. You know, so it was like the next module they built. So you've got constraints of string number, Boolean array, object, function, any, special considerations. So here they're doing string, alphanumeric, minimum of 3, maximum 30, with birth year. So if birth year was provided, then this is required. So you can do some interesting things there, or you can say without. So you can do, you know, sometimes these APIs, you know, you want things to be only one or the other and that kind of stuff. So this allows you to do regexes, strings, numbers, you know, so all that basic kind of stuff. And then and basically the response comes back, you know, appropriately. So if we fire that up, let's see here. Go up here and we say add foo and var. You know, it comes back bad request. Value must be a number. B must be a number. A and B must be a number. And then it shows the keys and, you know, the path of where it got those values from. And so basically, really easy to configure validation. Query string. So here's an example of basically it's a query string, and it's basically like the one before. So in this case, it's request.query.a instead of request.params. Same thing as far as validate. It's just use the query location, and obviously you can validate multiple things. So you could have stuff from the path and the query string, as well as the payload. And so here we're validating the payload, and I've got a final thing in here I was showing you as well. So you can do that. And so request.payload.a and request.payload.b gives you those parse parameters. And then you can actually do validation on the response. So that's interesting too. So now, if you wanted to make sure that you know, your response had certain things in it or didn't have certain things in it, then you can and you can configure this multiple ways where it fails as it errors, or you can let it go through and just log it. You know, as you know, it's more of a warning or something that your team wants to look at or something. So it has that built in. Let's see what else. Validation, caching, another great one. Okay, so for this example, I've got just one path. It's a large operation, takes A and B. Okay, and obviously, I got this one file, but normally what you would do is you'd have a routes file that's just got all your, your routes in there, and you just include that, and you know, it makes it nice and clean. So to turn on caching, there's a couple steps. One is to add it to the server options when we start it up. So again, we had that third parameter we could use, and so just by creating cache Redis. Cache memory, and there's several other ones, but memory would just be an in-memory caching, and then Redis is you can use that across multiple servers, you know, so it'll be the same instant can serve multiple, and you just turn that on. That's all there is to starting it, and then basically on the route you can configure it. So for this operation, I do want caching, and I can just say cache at the server. Their caching is really nice because it's built in, and it's based on the parameters that came in, and and then it will also, so you can set the expire time. So here we're saying it expires in 10 seconds, 10,000 milliseconds. But it's also got this ability to say that after a certain period of time it's stale. So after 7,000 milliseconds, what I got configured here, then basically HAPI will consider the data stale, and then when the next request comes in, it's going to go ahead and try to redo that request, you know, and you do the processing to go get the data or whatever. But you can also set a timeout and say if it takes longer than 250 milliseconds or whatever number you want, then go ahead and serve the old one, you know. But yet then as soon as that one does come back, that will fill the cache, you know. And so basically you can get this kind of this rolling cache, this self-warming cache that never has this big spike on time because it's constantly being refreshed, you know. And even if it takes too long, it'll be behind the scenes, it'll be refreshed. And so so for a Walmart type thing where you've got, you know, things are just being pounded all the time, this is, you know, a beautiful thing because then you can just really. Yeah, Michael, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I find that really compelling. I think that's really interesting. Is there equivalent sugar for like client-side fragments for the caching? I mean, can you set the client-side headers and things like that?
Good thing you asked. Yeah, that's to do that. You can basically change this to client right here, and it'll set the headers for client-side caching.
Can you do both together?
And to do both together, you just do client plus server.
Yes.
And so then you got in one place, you've got things set, you know, and obviously on the client, it's not going to, I don't think it does, I don't know if it uses the stale stuff, but or maybe it does, I don't know. I haven't looked close at it, but basically one place to set the caching, both the server and the client, and it'll set the headers and, you know, all that properly. Yeah, so pretty nice. Helpers, so this is another.
Sorry, Jeff, could I ask you?
Yeah, go for it.
Would the caching support kind of like a two-level cache with memory on the front of Redis? Or do you think, can you do that if you wanted to? Or?
I'm not sure if I understand.
So, could you actually have an in-memory cache that uses the expires and stale and so forth to where, I mean, maybe something like Mongo might be a better example, where it would only go to Mongo. I mean, basically I'm saying so that you would actually have local in-memory cache for each server in the cluster that would actually be backed by Redis or Mongo or something to be shared. So like an L1, L2 type of setup.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I mean, you know, I imagine that you could plug that in or something, but yeah, I mean, the default, you know, if you used memory, then it would be, the server itself would be, you know, caching. Redis caching would allow all the servers to have the same, you know, but it's limited by the throughput of Redis, which is pretty fast, but yeah, I mean.
That way, if you got a cache miss on a member of the cluster, you could still get a cache result as opposed to having to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so let's do the next one here. So the next one is helpers. So this is pretty nice too. Okay, so at the bottom again, just same thing as I had before, but in this case, I'm starting to use some of the other functionality. So one of the things that they found is that, you know, a lot of times you have these things that you want to use all over the place. So for instance, you want to go and find, you know, look up the user, you know, and you want to go get their preferences, and you want to go get their, you know, settings, and you want to go get their shopping cart, and maybe these are all, you know, separate things or whatever. So the idea is that you could set up, you can basically create the simple function. In this case, I'm just, you know, I can whatever parameters I want, and then the final parameter is the callback or the next function. And so here I'm simulating, you know, going out and just returning an object named Jeff after 3 seconds or whatever. So you can register this with the server.helper, give it whatever name you want, and that function. And then right in here now, I can also specify additional things. I can stop there. I don't need to do anything more. But if I want to, I can specify caching here. So now I can do caching of internal things as well. So now, you know, these user lookups, you know, can also be cached. So it's not only the external routes that can be cached, but you can use these functions all over the place now, and they can have caching baked right in. And they basically will use the you know, the parameters passed in to determine if it's, you know, a match and stuff. And there's a way to also configure it if you need more control over that. But yeah, so then down here in the handler function, and okay, so when you add these helpers now, they're available across the entire system. So once you've added it, that server.helper, now you can go into any other route and handler elsewhere on this server and reference that by that name that you already had there.
So it's a global throughout
It's inside the server. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's referenced here right in this helpers collection, server.helpers.
Is there a way you can set it for the context, like from a request, one flow, request flow?
Not that I saw. Yeah, not that I saw. So basically, we named it user, and so it's server.helpers a user. So now I can just basically say, I'm going to pass in the ID, that I get out of the params, and it's going to give me back a user. And note that this is it's not a normal node style callback. That's why I call it next, because it's just taking a single value back, and so we're passing back the user. And if you had an error, you would just pass an error back, and it would deal with that. So that's a simple helper, and then I got another example which builds on that a little more. Okay, so same thing here, same route, and in this case we've got again same function, I guess. Here I've got a user, and I've got a shopping cart, and I'm setting up the helper, as a user with a cache. I'm setting up the shopping cart with a cache, and then down here in my function, I can just say server.helpers user, go and get the user, go and get the cart, and then basically reply back with both. So a simple thing. But you can imagine now you can use these things and build them up, more and more.
Do they provide a facility for doing things in parallel?
Next slide, man. You guys are like right on my agenda. So. All right. Okay, same route as before. Building on the same thing we had here. You find user, find cart, find settings, and okay. Here's a interesting thing. Okay. I kind of alluded to this before, but there's this thing called prerequisites that you can configure for a route, and you can give it an array, and you can basically say, give it a bunch of different things here. These things that we've assigned up above, and it'll take. They don't have to be helpers. In this case, I'm just using functions. These were not set up as helpers. They're just pure functions, and I'm going to say I'm going to call that function, and it's gonna take. If we looked up above, since I didn't set these up as helpers or anything, they're basically taking in a request. So that's that same request that we've been used to, and then a next when you're done, passing back whatever object you want to pass back, or primitive or whatever it is. And so basically, I'm going to say call find user, and then I'm going to assign the result that comes back from the next to just you or some other longer name, and then the mode serial is default. And then I can say, again, I'm going to find cart and find settings. And so basically when I get done here, and when it finally gets into the handler, so it's going to do those things in order, find user, find cart, find settings, and when it finally gets into the handler here, you know that it's got all those things, or else if it errored, it's going to go back with an error. So it won't even go in here unless it's valid. And so then we got that all set up, and then we can basically those are stored. Those results are stored under the pre object. So we set it up with a pre for prerequisite, and they're named appropriately. So we set assign U. So U was the user, and C was the cart, and S was the settings. And so those things will all be set up for you. So you take that, and then you can build on it more. So they've got the ability that if you use these things as helpers, they've got even a little nicer syntax. So here I've done the same thing up above, but I've set them up as helpers. And now that they're helpers, they don't have to use request anymore. I can get rid of that HTTP logic, and I can just do pure business logic here. And I'm just dealing with pure objects in and out, business logic stuff. And so nothing special about those except that now they're taking parameters and calling next. And so I've set those up as helpers. And here now they've got a special mechanism. If you give it a string rather than a function, they actually they got a syntax where it'll basically assume that you're wanting to call helpers. This is not eval, so then don't worry about it. You can put anything in here, but it's a specific format that allows you to basically say user, call in the user helper, and actually I'm going to pass in the ID from params, and I'm going to assign that to you, and then same thing with card. I'm going to get the CID. And then finally settings, I'm going to get out of my pre. I'm going to get the username. And actually, you can keep drilling down. So user.name, so I can drill down into that and get the name only. And and then params.cid. And so this allows the mode parallel allows things to go in parallel now. So what it will do is so it's a pretty simple control flow. If you set things up as parallel, then all the things that are set up as parallel will go first. It'll try to do all those first. Then after that's done, then it'll start going in order as things are defined here for the serial things. And so it's not it's not super flexible other than those two things, but that can do a lot for you.
Can you alternate? Could you have a serial and a block parallel and then a serial?
Yeah, the order doesn't matter as far as what they are set up, except the serial ones will go in the order that they are set up. But the parallel ones will all go first, regardless of where they are in this set. It just assumes they all can go parallel, and then the other ones will be serial after that. And so so you can basically chain things, so it really provides a mechanism for your average developer to just kind of configure something, and you can still get some good benefits without having to deal with callback hell or whatever promises or other things like that. So it really just kind of cleans that code up. And finally, one last thing I'll show you, and I don't know if I showed it here or not. Maybe I didn't. But the helpers, they're caching. I think I did mention that before. But you can use caching on the helpers wherever they're at. So not only just on the route. And then the final thing I wanted to show, and then I'll talk about Strata and other questions. Okay, I alluded to this earlier about being able to not have to start the server up and being able to actually use the whole stack. And so this is great for testing, and it's also great for if you need to call back in the stack for other reasons, for that OAuth example or whatever. If you want to use your normal mechanism that you've already got set up without having the network overhead, you can just basically call inject. You're basically injecting a request basically into this server. And then it's gonna it takes an object, so I'm basically giving it a method and a URL. There's other things you can set, headers and auth and all that kind of stuff. And then basically it's going to come back with the response object. It's a HAPI response object, and then you can investigate all the properties on there and all the headers that came back and the content type and everything's there. And
you're basically mocking up a request.
Yeah, you're mocking up the request. Yeah, yeah. And so as far as comparing this to Strata, I think just the API, and there's tons of things I didn't get to, and I kind of even left them because I knew had to draw a line somewhere, because there's a lot more functionality that's in HAPI. And other plugins, there's a WebSocket viewer that you can watch things that are going on the server. There's loggers. There's cross-site request forgery protection. There's batching. They've got something called, I think batching is built in here. If you give a certain type of JSON request, it'll actually go out and execute all those as well, process those, and then come back with the results, and then return that as a combined result, which is great for mobile when you only have a slow network. And so you can batch things up. But they have something called Bassmaster, which I think adds on to that, and it allows you to do additional things with the batching and all that. So there's lots of neat things there. I guess another thing, let me just go back to the screen here and go show you some more things that are on the screen. So we went through the server. When you're looking at route stuff, this route.options here, that's where you're going to find that kind of thing. If you want to drill in the request object, there's more here. There's actually a life cycle. So much like Strata allowed you to chain up things, you can tap into this life cycle. And let's see if it'll. Some of these links. That's one of the things I want to help them with. Is some of the links broke, at times or whatever, so they might work and then they stop. But it's all on this page. You can just search down for Ford or whatever, and it's there. Life cycle. Let's see. So once you kind of know where you're looking, you can get around this site pretty good. Request life cycle. So there's an on request extension point, and they tell you about how these things are called. And this is the order of things that are done. Look up the route. They've got a nice mechanism for if you want to rewrite the route or rewrite the request. So one of the things at Walmart is they've got these old Java APIs that are take these weird combination of things, and it's overloaded to the heck. And so you can write real easy reroute module or function that basically can, and that's what they did, is they ended up making it into something, good names, more of a RESTful API that you'd want to see. And then basically that's all just, that's the first thing that gets called, and then it just, goes to the right spot. So they don't have to, developers don't have to worry about that crap. They get the nice names, and it's all, processed into the right place. So they mention all the steps here that go on, where it does the cookies, where it does the authentication, post authentication, on pre-handler, on post handler, so you can after the handler's done, what happens, and then there's the validate response, and then we did the validation of the response if you chose to turn that on, and there's an on pre-response hook, so you can again do something else if you want to, you can get the stream and do something else with it if you need to or whatever before or totally return something different. It's totally up to you as far as how that works. So anyway, they got the whole life cycle here: request, object response, errors, pack. With Walmart, they found that one of the next things they need to do is be able to configure multiple server or multiple. They wanted to run different IPs and different names and things. So pack basically allows you a way to configure multiple or the same stuff for multiple places. So maybe you wanted to run on SSL and port 80. So you could have one configuration and run a pack and do both. And you can also do things with the pack as far as like making. You can give them tags and names, and then you can refer to the packs by name and do additional things. So it's pretty neat. Composer, they took this configuration route even further, and they basically, if you use like plugins for a lot of this setup, then you can basically get down to with Composer where you basically just have a package JSON and a config JSON. And that's it. And then the combination of those two will give you a running server. And there's actually, if you run the HAPI command, there's actually a HAPI command line. And you can do HAPI-C pointed to config JSON, and it'll fire you up a server with all the configuration. So this was great because basically it's just a JSON file with a lot of the same stuff that we were configuring before. Servers, ports, cache, plugins, and all that stuff. And basically what they would do is they would have a package JSON, and then somebody do an npm install on that, and then fire up a server. And by having these as separate files, now they can have a different setup for config or for development versus test versus production versus whatever. These things are separate, and plugins are so they live separately, and it makes it really easy to fire it up. But it's all just configuration. So that's pretty slick too. So here's their plugin interface. Plugin interface gives you a lot of access to it. The idea is that you could have these modules all over the place. They could be an NPM, but they could also be on a private Git repository. And that's what they do. They set their modules up with a private Git path, and it just does a Git or a tarball pull, of a specific version they want to test. And so then they pull these plugins in and then test it, like that. But plugin gives you pretty much access to everything here. You can set up routes, you can set up helpers, you can do the whole thing. Because that's kind of how they evolved it. I mean, you can start out simple, but then you can split things up into plugins. Let's see where else I got. I'm not scrolling.
Jeff, we may need to.
Need to shut her off. Yeah. Okay. I think. All right. Just going down the list. Utils was where there's some additional utils in there for doing functional things. Types, that was the validation types for string and number and those things. And then state. And then there's a whole thing on state that I didn't get into, which you can set up how the cookies work, and you just all save the state and retrieve the state, and it can do things like get rid of it after you've accessed it. I mean there's tons of things, and stored encrypted and everything, so it's pretty slick. So Strata, comparing it, I think there's more to this. I think there's more functionality than Strata had. I think just the API is one of the things that just draws me to this. I think that I like Strata for what it did and for its abstraction and for some of the streaming capabilities, but this is just easier to get your head around. And I think as an average developer, and I think that's one of the right reason that they're really loving it over at Walmart as far as bringing new developers on, and it's easy for them to get up to speed. From basically what you've seen, Justin, is there any other things that you would compare against Strata or
middleware?
Yeah. I still don't understand the equivalent of middleware here.
Yeah.
They're
well, I didn't really show that. I guess. Yeah, there was the server events. Well, there's events, but there's also the where is it? It's EXT. It's server extensions.
When you're showing the example, sure, I can see it's easy, but there's certainly more concepts here than Strata. So I've got to wrap my head around more concepts.
Yeah. And the way I started out with it, I didn't like go in this whole thing. I basically started out, okay, first I looked at the hello world, and I said, okay, now I'm going to start playing with things and trying, and then as soon as I didn't know how to do something, then I would go here and a couple clicks, and it's like, oh, okay, and so then I would build on it. And so, I mean, there's still a lot in here that I have not read yet and not, all gotten together. But it seems like if you kind of have a general idea of how to get around in here, it makes sense once you see it. I mean, and I think they do need more documentation and tutorials and all that, and that's something that I hope to help out with CodeWins. I'm hoping to create a bunch of documents and screencasts and whatever, because I really like HAPI, and I want to see it succeed, and so I think this is a great opportunity to provide back to them as well. So but yeah, this server extensions function allows you to hook into those extension points I was looking at earlier, and so that would be where you can tie in middleware. I mean, it's basically middleware because you can basically tie in at these different places after the request, before the request, and I think there's a way the ordering goes in here. Yeah, you can also specify before and after. So if there's any dependencies on the way things should load, you can do that in here as well. And then there's a context object and things like that. So that would be kind of the equivalent of I guess middleware as far as HAPI's concerned.
Is that how you might do like login, where you want to yank somebody back to the login page if they don't have a session, or if there was that pre-auth post stuff?
Yeah, you could do that. I mean, or you can just do reply. There's a request redirect or something that you can just go. You can basically just do it. There's a method for that.
Yeah, I was just wondering about the aspect of that's the kind of thing you almost like AOP in Java or something, right?
Yeah.
You want to apply it globally across a whole bunch of routes and say, okay,
right.
Is there a session? If not, come back.
I'm not seeing it right now, but
there's a use authenticated flag right there. Is that what you see?
Yeah, there's definitely a way to the authentication. Yeah. The other thing you mentioned something that just triggered my mind. Oh, logging. They've got a nice logging in here too, and it's more like what we were doing at Elsevier as well, where instead of you could log to log events and specify tags rather than specify these arbitrary info, debug, warn, error type things. You could basically give it an array of tags, and it can keep track of the log, the logs for you. So if you call this request.log, I can't see it sideways, request.log and give it this object and some tags, then it'll keep all those things together with the request, and then you can display those and listen to events and all that. And they've got a built-in logger that'll take these things and spit them out if you want to put them in, and they'll use JSON or whatever, spit them out for you, or you can just watch them. There's a debug tool to watch these things, and also then you can do logs at the server level. So I mean, there's different logins all built in there for that. But so most of the things that I've ever needed, they're in there. I mean, obviously you can there's things you want to do custom things, but most of the things I was surprised. Like I was looking around for the gzip, and I was like, "Where's that at?" And well, it's on. You turn it on. If it gets the right header, it does it. So
So Jeff, actually the other day I was checking sales.js. So they have like inbuilt database drivers configured. So do these people have any drivers?
No, they didn't want to go that far with like being like a Rails or something, where they wanted to have a built-in OR, and they wanted to keep that separate. At least so far. I mean, they do have I did mention as well. There's a views thing where it'll call your template and render that or whatever. Makes it easy to do all that. But yeah, they don't go down to the ORM level and all that.
So is that a templating engine? They comes with
yeah, they use like handlebars and it's basically anything that does like a render function or whatever, or just a function call it passing an object or something. So you can use many whatever it takes that, or make a new one that you can plug in. So yeah. So I guess we're wrapping up. Any last questions or anything that burning? You can catch me afterwards too.
This is. I saw you mentioned code coverage.
Yeah.
What they're using, Istanbul or something big.
When he did the interview, the video, he said that somebody asked that question, and they were using they were using Mocha at the time. I think they might have maybe created their own version of that, but they were plugging whatever plugs into JS Cub, I think, or whatever plugs into Mocha. They were using that, and they also extended that a little bit to make it do additional coverage. Summary: I think it's a great web app and REST framework. Most of the stuff's built in. It's really designed for maintainability, large teams, and scalability, reusability. I think it needs more docs. I mean, I think what they got's great, but I think that's something I can help out with, or other people. And just getting the word out about people using it, because that's the hard part. Is until people know about it, they don't want to do anything with it, or do a new project. Nobody's got time to learn about them. So that'll help once it's kind of a chicken and egg thing. Once you get things going, then more people will come and all that. So I'm going to try and work on that. And so happyjs.com. If you want to follow them on Twitter, it's happyjs. I'm going to continue to work on a series. I'll be doing blog posts and screencasts. And this is my blog, codewins.com/bloghtml. And I have a Twitter at Codewins and Jeff Barczewski. And I thank you for listening, and appreciate it.